Power has a way of revealing truth. When Maya Richardson walks into Sterling and Porter Financial's gleaming offices, she knows something's different. The new CEO's smirk, the hushed whispers, the warning glances from colleagues, it's all building towards something explosive. But Maya didn't become the firm's youngest senior analyst by accident, and by day's end, the corner office won't be the only thing that changes. Maya Richardson stepped into the gleaming lobby of Sterling and Porter Financial, straightening her blazer as the morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 32, she was the youngest senior financial analyst in the firm's history, and its only black female executive. The security guard, Joe, gave her his usual warm smile. He'd been here longer than anyone, had seen executives come and go, had watched Maya's rise from intern to senior analyst over the past decade. His eyes held a warning today. "Mr. Sterling's in rare form this morning, Ms. Richardson," he murmured as she passed. "Already sent 2 people from marketing home crying." Maya nodded, her grip tightening on her leather portfolio. Charles Sterling III had inherited the firm from his father 3 months ago, and the change in leadership had been challenging. The younger Sterling seemed determined to reshape the company in his image, regardless of the human cost. The elevator ride to the 47th floor was tense. Maya shared it with Thomas Chen from legal and Sarah Martinez from HR, both looking as though they'd rather be anywhere else. The quarterly earnings meeting was in 20 minutes, and everyone knew Sterling was looking for someone to blame for the recent dip in profits. "Did you see the email?" Sarah whispered. "He wants to streamline operations in the diversity initiative departments." Maya had seen it. She'd spent half the night preparing a presentation, proving that diverse teams consistently outperformed homogeneous ones, backed by 5 years of the firm's own data. Whether Sterling would listen was another matter entirely. The 47th floor was eerily quiet when they arrived. The usual buzz of activity was replaced by hushed conversations behind closed doors. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Maya could see Sterling holding court. His perfectly tailored suit and carefully styled hair, a stark contrast to his father's more approachable appearance. "Ah, Richardson," he called out as she entered, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Just the person I wanted to see. Tell me, how's that special project of yours going? The one with the community outreach?" The way he said special made it clear what he thought of the initiative. Maya had developed a program connecting inner-city students with financial literacy resources and mentorship opportunities. It had been Charles Sterling II's pet project, and it generated significant positive press and client goodwill. "The Financial Futures Initiative has exceeded its quarterly targets," Maya replied evenly, pulling up the relevant slides on her tablet. "Client participation is up 30%, and we've seen a 15% increase in new accounts from previously underserved communities." Sterling waved his hand dismissively. Yes, but what's the immediate ROI? We're not running a charity here." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Maya felt the weight of every gaze, the silent tension of colleagues who respected her work but feared for their own position. "Actually," she began, but Sterling cut her off. "You know what your problem is, Richardson? You're too emotional about these things, too invested in feel-good projects instead of hard numbers. Maybe it's a cultural thing?" The sharp intake of breath around the room was audible. Sarah from HR was already scribbling furiously in her notebook, while Thomas Chen studied his coffee cup with sudden intensity. Maya felt the familiar surge of anger, carefully contained behind years of professional training. She'd heard variations of this speech throughout her career, from professors who suggested she might be more comfortable at a different school, to managers who praised her for being surprisingly articulate. Sterling wasn't finished. "Don't get me wrong, you people can be very hardworking when properly motivated. My father was big on all this diversity stuff, but times are changing. We need to focus on proven performers, people who understand our traditional client base." The silence in the room was deafening. Maya could feel her pulse in her temples, could hear her mother's voice urging patience, her father's reminding her that excellence was the best revenge. But before she could respond, Angela Chen from marketing burst into the room. "Mr. Sterling, we have a situation. The Watson account, there's been a development." The Watson account was their largest client, a family-owned investment firm with billions in managed assets. Sterling's face lost some of its smugness. "Can it wait? We're in the middle of a meeting." "Sir, Mr. Watson is on line 1. He's asking specifically for Maya." Now Sterling's expression darkened considerably. Herbert Watson had been Maya's mentor during her internship, had championed her rise through the ranks. His approval carried weight with the board of directors. "Take the call in my office," Sterling ordered Maya, his tone suggesting this wasn't a courtesy, but a command. "We'll continue this discussion later." As Maya walked to Sterling's corner office, she could feel the momentum shifting. Something was happening, something that would change the dynamic between her and Sterling forever. But the true impact wouldn't be clear for hours, and the real confrontation was still to come. Behind her, she heard Sterling resuming his critique of unnecessary initiative and traditional values. But Maya's mind was already racing ahead, analyzing angles, calculating risks and opportunities. She hadn't survived and thrived in this world by accident. The Watson call would set in motion a chain of events that would test everything: her principles, her patience, and her power to effect change. But for now, she kept her expression neutral as she picked up the phone, aware that Sterling was watching through the glass walls of his office. "Mr. Watson," she began, "what can I do for you?" The answer would change everything, but those changes would take time to unfold. And Maya Richardson had learned long ago that timing was everything. Herbert Watson's voice was grave. "Maya, my dear, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Through the glass, Maya could see Sterling attempting to regain control of the meeting, but people kept glancing her way. She turned her back to the conference room. "Not at all, Mr. Watson. How can I help? I've been reviewing some concerning information about Sterling and Porter's recent directional changes. My sources tell me the new leadership is considering scaling back several key initiatives, including yours." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "Mr. Watson, call me Herbert, please. We've known each other too long for formalities, especially given what I'm about to tell you." What followed was a 15-minute conversation that left Maya's head spinning. The Watson family was planning to restructure their entire investment portfolio. They wanted to move significant assets into socially responsible investments, with a focus on diversity and community development. "We're looking at creating a new fund," Herbert explained. "Billions in initial capital. And we want someone with both financial expertise and genuine commitment to community impact to manage it." Maya's pulse quickened. "That's quite an opportunity." "It is, and you're our first choice to head it up, whether that's at Sterling and Porter or elsewhere." The implied threat to pull their business was clear. Maya glanced at the conference room, where Sterling was becoming visibly agitated at the length of her call. "I'll need time to consider the details," she said carefully. "Of course. But Maya, we're not the only ones watching how Sterling Jr. handles the transition. His father built a reputation for ethical leadership. The industry notices when that changes." After hanging up, Maya took a moment to compose herself. Through the glass, she could see Sterling gesturing emphatically about something, his face flushed with apparent frustration. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah in HR. "He's talking about traditional corporate culture again. Save us." Another message followed, this one from Thomas in legal. "Check your email. You need to see this." Maya opened her inbox to find a forwarded email chain. Internal communications discussing the liability of certain diversity programs. Her name appeared several times, always with thinly veiled criticism of her agenda. But what caught her attention was the timestamp. These discussions had started before Sterling Sr.'s death, suggesting the current situation wasn't just about Charles III's prejudices. There was something bigger at play. She returned to the conference room just as Sterling was reaching the crescendo of another monologue about merit-based advancement. "Ah, Richardson, nice of you to rejoin us," he sneered. "I trust Mr. Watson's call was illuminating?" "Very," Maya replied, taking her seat. "He had some interesting perspectives on corporate leadership and social responsibility." Sterling's eye twitched slightly. "Well, while you were chatting, we were discussing real business. I was just explaining how certain initiatives might be better handled by people with more traditional financial backgrounds." The room held its breath, waiting for Maya's response, but she simply opened her laptop and began typing, her expression neutral. "What are you doing?" Sterling demanded. "Documenting today's meeting as per company policy," she replied calmly, "including all comments about cultural things and you people. I believe HR requires detailed records of such discussions." Sarah tried to hide a smile behind her notebook. Sterling's face reddened. "Now, see here," but Maya wasn't finished. "I'm also drafting a preliminary proposal for the Watson family's new investment fund. Unless you'd prefer I direct that opportunity elsewhere." The shift in the room was palpable. Several board members sat up straighter. Sterling's face went from red to pale. "What investment fund?" "Perhaps we should discuss it privately," Maya suggested, "along with some other matters that have recently come to my attention." Her phone buzzed again. Another email, this one from a business reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Subject line: "Request for comment on Sterling and Porter leadership changes." The pieces were falling into place, but Maya knew better than to show her full hand too soon. Sterling might be blindly prejudiced, but he wasn't stupid, and cornered predators were always the most dangerous. "My office!" Sterling snapped. Now! As Maya gathered her materials, she noticed Thomas Chen making a discreet phone call. Sarah was still taking notes, and through the glass walls, she could see other employees watching intently, sensing that something significant was unfolding. The next few hours would determine not just her future at Sterling and Porter, but the direction of the entire firm. But first, she had a few more cards to play. Sterling held the door to his office open, his smile tight and artificial. Maya entered with her head high, knowing that beyond these glass walls, an audience waited to see who would emerge victorious. The real battle was about to begin, but its outcome would depend on much more than just this one confrontation. Inside Sterling's office, Maya noticed small changes since his father's tenure. The Community Service Awards replaced by hunting trophies, the diverse art collection swapped for traditional landscapes. Everything designed to send a message about returning to traditional values. "Sit!" Sterling commanded, taking his place behind the massive desk. Maya remained standing. "I prefer to stand for this conversation, Mr. Sterling." His jaw tightened at her subtle defiance. "Fine. Tell me about this Watson Fund. $3 billion in initial capital," Maya stated, "focused on socially responsible investments, with emphasis on diversity and community development. They want it managed by someone with both financial expertise and demonstrated commitment to social impact. And naturally, you think that should be you." His tone dripped with condescension. "Actually, it will be me," Maya corrected. "The question is whether it will happen here at Sterling and Porter, or..." She let the sentence hang. Sterling's fingers drummed on his desk. "Are you threatening me, Richardson?" "Not at all. I'm presenting options, just like I'm sure you'll want options when the Journal runs their story about the firm's changing direction under your leadership." His face darkened. "What story?" Maya pulled out her tablet, displaying the reporter's email. "They're particularly interested in these internal communications about diversity initiatives, the ones that started before your father's death." Sterling's expression flickered. Something like fear crossed his face before he masked it. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Fact 1. These discussions about dismantling diversity programs began months ago. Fact 2. Your father's accident occurred very suddenly, just as he was preparing to announce an expansion of these same programs." The color drained from Sterling's face. "Be very careful, Richardson." "Fact 3, she continued calmly. "The board meets next week to review your first quarter as CEO. I'm sure they'll be interested in how you've handled the Watson account and these other matters." Sterling stood abruptly, looming over his desk. "You have no idea what you're playing with." "Actually, I do, because your father taught me everything he knew about this business, including where to look when numbers don't add up." Her phone buzzed again. Another email from Herbert Watson. "Board members standing by, waiting for your signal." "Yeah." Sterling must have seen something in her expression, because he sank back into his chair. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hollow. "That's not the right question," Maya replied. "The right question is, what would your father want for this company?" Outside the office, employees tried to appear busy while watching the drama unfold behind the glass walls. Sarah from HR had positioned herself near Sterling's assistant's desk, ostensibly reviewing documents. Thomas Chen lingered by the water cooler, phone at ready. Maya's tablet lit up with another notification. The Wall Street Journal reporter was getting impatient for comment. And there were other emails now, from board members, from major clients, from community leaders who'd supported the firm's initiatives. Sterling stared at the hunting trophies on his wall, his father's replacements for years of community service awards. "You think you've won something here?" he asked quietly. "You think anyone will believe." But before he could finish, his assistant burst in. "Sir, the board is calling an emergency meeting. They're conferencing in now." Sterling's face went ashen. "What? On whose authority?" "Multiple board members, sir. They're asking for Ms. Richardson to join as well." The pieces were falling into place faster than Maya had anticipated, but she knew better than to celebrate too early. Men like Charles Sterling III didn't give up power easily. Her phone buzzed one more time. A message from an unknown number. "Parking garage security footage recovered. You need to see this." The game was changing by the minute, the stakes rising higher than even Maya had planned. As Sterling's assistant set up the video conference, Maya could feel the weight of decades of corporate culture, of systemic bias, of carefully maintained power structures, all balanced on the edge of transformation. But the real revelation, the one that would shake Sterling and Porter to its foundations, was still to come. The conference screen flickered to life, showing grave faces of board members. And there, in the center, was Herbert Watson himself, holding what appeared to be a manila envelope. "Charles," he said grimly, "I believe it's time we discussed your father's last visit to my office." The manila envelope contained photographs, surveillance images from the parking garage the night Charles Sterling II died. What had been ruled a tragic accident was now cast in a very different light. Your father came to see me that evening, Herbert Watson continued, his voice echoing through the conference room speaker. He brought documents, evidence of unauthorized transactions, systematic discrimination in client services, and a pattern of internal sabotage against diversity initiative. Sterling's face had gone from ashen to gray. Maya noticed his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. He also, Watson added, left this with me. He held up a USB drive, a complete audit of company practices over the past 5 years, including some very interesting emails about plans to restore traditional leadership after his retirement, emails that predate his death by months. Sarah from HR had stopped pretending to review documents. Thomas Chen wasn't even trying to hide that he was recording everything on his phone. Through the glass walls, Maya could see other employees gathering, sensing that history was being made. "This is ridiculous," Sterling stammered. "You can't possibly—" "We can, and we have," another board member cut in. "The evidence is overwhelming, Charles. The only question now is how we handle this transition." Maya's tablet buzzed again. The Wall Street Journal reporter had been joined by others. The story was spreading. "Ms. Richardson," Watson addressed her directly, "given your history with both the company and the late Charles Sterling II, the board would like to discuss your role in the firm's future leadership." Sterling shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. She's barely been here 10 years. She's not qualified to—" "To what?" Maya interrupted, her voice calm, but carrying an edge that silenced the room. "To understand ethical leadership, to recognize that profit and social responsibility aren't mutually exclusive, to carry on your father's real legacy." She turned to face the board members on the screen. "For 10 years, I've watched this company balance profit with purpose. I've seen the real impact of our community initiatives, and I've documented everything, the successes, the obstacles, and the attempts to undermine these programs." Her phone lit up with another message, this one from building security. They'd found something in the parking garage, hidden behind a maintenance panel, something that would change everything. Sterling must have received the same alert because his face went completely white. "I need to— excuse me," he stammered, standing up. "Sit down, Charles," Watson commanded. "We're not finished. In fact, we're just getting to the most interesting part." Maya's tablet showed a new email from the forensics team that had been quietly working in the garage. Attached were photographs of something that made her blood run cold, but also confirmed everything she'd suspected. The corporate power dynamics were shifting by the second. Decades of carefully maintained hierarchies were crumbling. But Maya knew that moments of greatest victory could also be the most dangerous. Sterling's hand had slipped into his desk drawer. Maya caught a glimpse of metal before he quickly closed it again. The board members were still talking, laying out plans for leadership transition and corporate restructuring. But Maya's attention was focused on Sterling's increasingly erratic movement, the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his eyes kept darting to the office door. She pressed send on a pre-written message to security. Years of working in hostile environments had taught her to always have contingency plans. Through the glass walls, she saw Joe, the security guard from the lobby, quietly positioning himself near the office entrance. Other security personnel were discreetly clearing the floor. Watson was still speaking. "Given these developments, the board has unanimously decided," but whatever he said next was drowned out by the sound of Sterling's drawer flying open. The next few seconds would determine not just the future of Sterling and Porter, but possibly lives as well. Maya had prepared for many scenarios, but what happened next would test every ounce of her training and instinct. Sterling's hand emerged from the drawer, holding not a weapon, as Maya had feared, but a small black ledger, his father's private notebook, the one that had gone missing the night of his death. "Is this what you're all looking for?" His voice had taken on a manic edge. "Daddy's precious little book of secrets?" Maya noticed a subtle gesture from Watson on the screen, a signal to keep Sterling talking while something happened in the background. "Your father kept meticulous records," Maya said carefully, "of everything." Sterling laughed, a harsh sound nothing like his usual controlled chuckle. "Oh yes, he documented it all. Every progressive policy that was eating away at this company's foundation. Every diversity hire that diluted our traditional culture. Every cent wasted on community programs instead of real business. Those programs increased our client base by 40%, Maya countered. They opened new markets, brought in fresh perspectives. They brought in people like you," Sterling spat. "People who don't understand our heritage, our values. Father was weak, letting it all happen. He needed to be stopped before he ruined everything." The confession hung in the air, recorded by multiple devices and the office's security system. Through the glass, Maya saw Thomas Chen speaking urgently into his phone, while Sarah frantically typed notes. "Charles!" Watson's voice was gentle now, almost paternal. "Your father was trying to adapt the company to a changing world. He saw the future. He saw nothing?" Sterling slammed the ledger down on his desk. "He was blind to what really matters, just like all of you. But I fixed it. I fixed everything." Maya's tablet lit up with an urgent message from the forensics team in the garage. "Murder weapon found. Matching fingerprints confirmed. Police en route." Sterling must have seen something in her expression because his eyes narrowed. "What are you looking at, Richardson? What do you know?" "I know your father suspected someone was sabotaging his initiatives," she replied steadily. "I know he was gathering evidence, and I know he called me the night he died, asking me to meet him the next morning to discuss something urgent." Sterling's face contorted. "He called you?" "He trusted me, Charles. He was grooming me for leadership, not because of some diversity quota, but because he saw something in me that you never could." The elevator chimed in the distance. Maya heard the subtle shuffle of police officers taking position. Sterling flipped open the ledger, his movements increasingly agitated. "Trust? Leadership? Let me show you what dear old Dad really thought about leadership." He began reading entries aloud, detailed notes about company strategy, personnel decisions, future plans. But as he turned the pages, his voice faltered. The most recent entries were different. They were about him. "Charles continues to resist change, concerning communications with conservative board members. Evidence of systematic undermining of diversity program. Must accelerate succession plan. Meeting with Maya tomorrow to discuss." The last entry was dated the night of his death. Sterling stared at the page, his facade crumbling. He was planning to name me as his successor, Maya finished quietly. "Not because I'm black or a woman or any other category you want to put me in, but because I understand what he understood, that real leadership is about growth, about adaptation, about seeing the future instead of clinging to the past." Police officers appeared outside the office door, Joe the security guard directing them with silent gestures. Sterling looked up from the ledger, his eyes wild. "You think you've won? You think you can just take everything my family built?" His hand moved toward the drawer again, but this time Maya was ready. "Your family built this company on principles, Charles. Your grandfather survived the Depression by investing in communities when other banks wouldn't. Your father transformed it into a modern institution that valued all people. The only one destroying your family's legacy is you." The office door began to open. Sterling's hand closed around something in the drawer. The board members leaned forward in their screens, and Maya Richardson, who had fought her way up through every barrier and bias, prepared for what would come next. The object Sterling pulled from his drawer wasn't a weapon. It was a photo, a faded image of himself as a boy, standing between his father and grandfather in front of the original Sterling and Porter building. "We were supposed to be legends," he whispered, staring at the photo. "A dynasty, not some social experiment." The police officers had entered silently, positioning themselves around the office. Detective Sandra Rodriguez, who had been investigating Charles II's death, stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, we need to discuss the evidence found in the parking garage." But Sterling seemed lost in the photograph. "Did you know," he addressed Maya without looking up, "that when my grandfather started this firm, he had to fight for respect? People said he wasn't traditional enough either. Wrong background, wrong connections." "I know," Maya replied. "Your father told me that story, about how your grandfather proved them wrong by outworking, outthinking, and outperforming everyone else. Sound familiar?" For the first time, Sterling really looked at her, not through her or past her, but at her. Something shifted in his expression. "He said you reminded him of his father," Sterling said quietly. "That last night, during our argument, he said you had the same fire, the same drive to prove everyone wrong." Maya's tablet buzzed with another update. The forensics team had found more. Documents, emails, recording. A conspiracy involving not just Sterling, but several board members who had opposed the company's progressive direction. On the conference screen, some of those same board members were suddenly experiencing technical difficulties with their connection. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," Sterling continued, his voice distant. "Father was just supposed to retire early. Take a step back. Let me restore things to the way they were meant to be." "But that's not what happened, is it?" Detective Rodriguez pressed gently. "Something went wrong that night." Sterling's fingers trembled on the photograph. He wouldn't listen, kept talking about the future, about legacy, about his plans for... He looked at Maya again. "He was going to announce it at the quarterly meeting, your promotion, the expansion of all those programs, everything I'd worked to prevent." The confession spilled out in broken phrases. The argument in the parking garage, the push that wasn't meant to be fatal, the hasty cover-up aided by sympathetic board members. Maya thought of all the times Charles II had mentored her, had defended her against prejudice, had encouraged her to reach higher. She thought of his vision for the company's future, a future his son had killed him to prevent. Through the glass walls, employees watched in stunned silence as Charles Sterling III was led away in handcuffs. Detective Rodriguez paused at the door. "Ms. Richardson, we'll need your statement. And there's something else. A letter found in Charles II's briefcase. It's addressed to you." Maya's hand shook slightly as she took the sealed envelope. The board members who remained connected watched intently. "Maya," Herbert Watson's voice was gentle. "Whatever that letter contains, know that the board has already made its decision about the company's future leadership." She looked around the office, at the hunting trophies that would soon be replaced, at the traditional landscapes that had supplanted diverse artwork, at the chair where Charles II had once told her that excellence was the best revenge against prejudice. The letter in her hands represented the final word in a story that had started long before today. But as she prepared to open it, Maya knew that it was also the beginning of something new. The real transformation of Sterling and Porter was about to begin. But first, there were truths in that letter that would change everything they thought they knew about Charles Sterling II's plans for his company's future. Sarah from HR appeared at the door with a stack of documents. "Maya, the press is gathering in the lobby, and the other board members who lost connection, they're being questioned by FBI agents right now." The letter felt heavy in Maya's hands. The next few moments would reveal just how deep the conspiracy went, and just how far Charles II had gone to protect his vision for the company's future. With steady hands, Maya opened the letter. Charles Sterling II's familiar handwriting filled the pages. "Dear Maya, if you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. The opposition to our progress was deeper than I initially suspected, reaching into the board itself. But you already know that, don't you? You've always seen more than others gave you credit for. I'm writing this after discovering evidence of a coordinated effort to dismantle everything we've built. Charles is merely the visible face of a larger resistance to change. The board members involved, Peterson, Whitman, and Hayes, have been orchestrating this for months. What they don't know is that I've been preparing for this possibility. The Watson account, our largest, is already secured under your oversight. The diversity initiatives are legally protected by a separate foundation I established last month. And this letter, along with the evidence I've gathered, ensures the truth will be known. Maya, you weren't just my protege. You were my insurance policy. Every time they underestimated you, dismissed you, tried to marginalize you, you were proving why you were the perfect choice to carry this company forward. Your excellence wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about being exactly right for this moment. By the time they realize what I've done, it will be too late. The shareholder agreements, the succession plans, the restructured voting rights, it's all been legally executed. You don't need the board's approval to take control. You already have it. They thought they were watching Charles, but they should have been watching you. Maya looked up from the letter to find Herbert Watson smiling on the video screen. "I take it Charles explained everything?" Watson asked. "You knew?" "I was his witness for the legal documents. The night he died, he had just finished transferring controlling interest to the foundation, the one you're now legally in charge of." The implications hit Maya all at once. She wasn't just being promoted to CEO. She had controlling interest in the company itself. Sarah burst in again. "Maya, you need to see this." The office televisions were showing breaking news. FBI agents were leading away board members, Peterson, Whitman, and Hayes in handcuffs. The conspiracy had crumbled in hours. Maya returned to the letter. "There will be resistance. Some will say you're not ready, not qualified, not traditional enough. But remember what I told you the day I hired you. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. The future belongs to those brave enough to shape it. You once asked me why I hired you as an intern when other firms wouldn't even interview you. The truth is, I saw in you what my father saw in someone who would never settle for being good enough, who would turn every obstacle into a stepping stone. Take care of my company, Maya. Make it better than I ever could. And remember, the best revenge against prejudice isn't just excellent. It's excellence that changes the world. With faith in your future, Charles Sterling II." Maya stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Behind her, she could hear the office coming back to life. Sarah was coordinating with PR, Thomas was working with legal, and Watson was addressing the remaining board members about the transition. She thought about that first day as an intern, how Charles II had defended her against his own son's sneers, how he'd mentored her, challenged her, prepared her, not just for leadership, but for this exact moment. Turning back to the room, Maya straightened her blazer and picked up her tablet. There was work to be done. "Sarah, call a company-wide meeting for tomorrow morning. Thomas, I want a full audit of every diversity initiative that was targeted. Watson, let's talk about expanding that community investment fund. As people scrambled to comply, Maya sat down at what had been Sterling III's desk. She removed the hunting trophies and restored the community service awards from a box they'd been stored in. Finally, she hung a new photograph on the wall, one of her with Charles II at a community center opening, both of them smiling at a future they could see clearly. The office hummed with renewed energy as word spread about the changes coming. Maya could hear fragments of excited conversation, see hope returning to faces that had been fearful just hours before. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Joe, the security guard. Your father would be proud, Ms. Richardson. Both of them would. Maya smiled, thinking of her own father, who taught her perseverance, and Charles II's, who taught her leadership. Different men who'd believed in the same thing, that excellence wasn't just about proving others wrong, but about proving yourself right. She opened her laptop and began to write. To all Sterling & Porter employees, today marks not just a change in leadership, but a recommitment to our core value. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows through the office windows. But inside Sterling & Porter, a new day was just beginning.